Remember last year's amazing trip? That cute first birthday party? All those photos, all those memories can be freed from your phone with a Shutterfly photo book. Rediscover and share your favorite moments with those you love. You'll be amazed how easy it is to make a photo book with Shutterfly and enjoy it for years to come. Get 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about yet another controversial chapter in Sortis Holdings' mismanagement of popular local restaurants, the drama that unfolded at an Old Town Chinatown Association meeting, and how the remarkable drop in Portland car thefts can be traced back to cancer research. Joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup are CityCast Director of Digital Strategy, Bryan Vance, and our very own producer, Giulia Fiaoni. It's Friday, February 14th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Bryan, Giulia, thanks for hanging out with me this morning.
Hey, Claudia.
Hey, good morning.
For those of you new to the show, today is a day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. But before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests a little better. And today's opening question is actually related to Tuesday's episode. If you didn't catch it, our executive producer, John Atariani, who is off today because he's busy moving, spoke to our nature and outdoors correspondent, Norther Emily, about getting a head start on planning your summer outdoor adventures, since a lot of state parks have permit and camping reservations that open up around this time, and because spring is just a little over a month away, which is kind of crazy because it's literally snowing outside right now.
Oh, yeah.
So I just thought, Bryan, your hands are frozen because you just went on a dog walk.
They're icicles.
Let's just mentally go to the summer.
Just dream a little.
Let's just dream a little. So my question to you two is, what big outdoor summer adventure goal do you have? And I mean, if you're new to the Northwest, know that this is a thing. Like, people are just like, this summer,
all winter, and
I'm gonna, you know what I mean? And you have your thing that you're gonna do. I'm not gonna, follow up on you. I'm not gonna be like, liar. So, just give it to me. Give me your big dream this summer.
She's gonna fact check us.
I do have an immediate idea I'm happy to share. I need to get down to the southern Oregon coast.
Yeah.
I've been talking about this one on the show for a very long time. We have an episode about it. I have the whole itinerary.
It's amazing.
Just mapped out for me. It's the dream goal.
I do feel I love that I'm like, oh, you're copying me.
Copyrighted it.
Oh, you're copying my summer adventure. Shout out my girlfriend who hates being in cars and did it with me.
Shout out.
That's a long drive. Yeah.
Yeah.
To this day, I'm like, we had fun, right? And she's like, yeah.
Never again.
I had so much fun. Whatever. What about you, Bryan?
I mean, that sounds good. I've been down to the southern Oregon coast. I've never been to actual southern Oregon. I've never been to Medford and Ashland and stuff. And I really want to do that. But I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and just say paddleboarding Trillium Lake. That's just something I've been wanting to do.
I've actually done that.
It's just and I want to do it when it's clear so you can see the mountain.
It's gorgeous. Okay, two things. I don't own a paddleboard. A friend did it and found out then that I was terrible at it.
Oh, I cannot
so
balance.
bad.
Yeah.
So
I
bad.
love paddleboarding.
And I was like, I guess I'm a kayak lady, It's a gorgeous view. The one thing that I was like, wow, this is interesting is Trillium Lake, the water isn't as clear as you would think.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I'll be honest, it's a little gross.
Yeah. I've been up there a lot in the winter, and I've been up there once or twice in the summer just to hike around, and it's a little...
there's somebody out there who's freaking would die for Trillium, and they're like, fuck you.
Right. How dare you speak ill of Trillium Lake, Claudia?
Maybe it was just the one day I was there. I mean,
well,
I
it's,
don't
it's got that little dam there, so I don't know how much fresh water is flowing into it constantly. So there are definitely cleaner alpine lakes,
but it's a gorgeous view.
It's gorgeous, and I don't want to carry my paddleboard on my back up a 5-mile hike. No, thank you. So it's the one I'm gonna do.
Bryan, you got to do it. And there's little camping spots around, so bring something to grill if you want. It's so much fun. Okay. After I've literally shat on every one of your ideas. I'm like,
She's
I already
done 'em
did
all.
that. And
Yeah.
the Chilean Lake
Claudia's
sucks.
like, your dreams are my lifestyle.
That was Tuesday.
That was Tuesday.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
she wasn't on the show Tuesday. Now we know what she
Hey,
was doing.
suspicious.
Okay. Mine is, it's something I brought up last year, but I didn't get to do, but I'm actually doing it. It's happening. I'm going to climb Mount St. Helens.
Oh, really?
Nice.
I know. Okay, guys,
Oh.
I've been saying this for, I don't know, 10 years. So
Yeah.
I don't, and what happens is the permits, but now that I listen to that episode, by the way,
Now you
guys,
know.
if you listen to this episode, you'll know about permit cycles. That the permit cycle has always been really intimidating, but Northrop broke it down in such a way where I'm like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
just feel like every time I go online, I'm like, what?
Well, especially
like-
because it's a government website, so it's not
It's so
the
confusing.
easiest to
multiple
use.
government
so
websites.
confusing. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, what? So now I kind of get it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's something I've always wanted to do, but I've never bothered to get in good enough shape to do it. So
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you all about it, Brian, if I do it.
yeah, definitely. Maybe that'll motivate me.
Well, thank you both for your answers. Before I hand it over to you, Brian, I actually have 2 quick corrections. In our last Friday roundup during our opening question, a couple of us, well, mostly me, confused Peabot with TriMet during an anecdote, which is embarrassing as hell because not only do we here at CityCast Portland know the difference, we are also working on a very top secret project with Peabot and have quite literally, well, me in particular, promised some of them to their faces that we would stop screwing that up
again.
because we do it all the time, Brian. Now it appears like that it's impossible for us to do. So everyone, just so you know, learn with us. Peabot is roads, road safety, and transportation, and is under the city. TriMet is transit, so buses and the MAX, and it's part of Metro. Stop confusing them. You're making them both so mad. Stop it. Okay, so the other correction is that during yesterday's episode, where John, Julia, and myself discussed our favorite Oregon exports, which, by the way, was super fun to make, you should totally listen to, I meant to say Kurt Russell's dad owned the Mavericks, a short-lived Portland baseball team, but instead I said Kurt Douglas's dad, a bastardization of Kurt Russell's name, and Kirk Douglas, who is the father of Michael Douglas. Some listeners gave me credit for thinking I had actually said Kirk Douglas, but to be fully transparent, I didn't even get the wrong name right. I said Kurt Douglas, which when I Googled, because I'm like, oh, is that someone? And Google was like, who?
Yeah, like what
Did
are you
you
talking
mean
about?
Kirk Douglas?
You were just free jazzing it.
I really was. So in conclusion, all of this is Julia's fault. She should have caught all of this in the mix.
Oh, man.
And we're docking her pay appropriately. So on to the news of the week.
That feels fair.
All right, Brian, what are you looking at this week?
Well, that private equity group who goes by like several different names that bought up a bunch of beloved Portland restaurants and businesses is in the news again with some reporting from Michael Russell and Jonathan Bach of Oregon Live. There's actually 2 stories out this week. One is that Sizzle Pie, which they own now, its original location on East Burnside Street is closing on Sunday, February 23rd after, I don't even know, like 13 years, something like that. And coincidentally, it comes a month after that location voted to unionize. SoHi Brands, the new name for Sortis Holdings, says they're not linked, that, the landlord and them couldn't reach a deal. But, it's a little fishy.
It's a little.
Yeah.
It's a little fishy.
suspicious.
And the other story in the news is that they might get out of some pretty large debt by only paying about 10%. So they owe several creditors about $8 million. Those creditors were actually suing and trying to get the business liquidated so that they would have to, sell off all these brands that they've bought that they've pretty poorly run over the past several years.
Yeah.
But they have struck a deal now where for the low price of $800,000, they can get out of that and can keep running these businesses and closing locations and
Keep on doing the great job they're doing already.
all the wonderful stuff that this private equity group is doing to beloved restaurants and local businesses. What was your first reaction specifically to the Sizzle Pie location?
What I thought was really interesting, you guys, is that when I was looking into because there's a few articles, I love that the Oregonian was like, 1 and a 2, they did a 1-2 punch on Sortis, is that it wasn't just like they're debt free now. No, these are just like the creditors that went after them.
It's a very specific group, yeah.
Yeah, they still have more than 80 creditors across several states. So they're not out of the woods yet, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No,
Like, it's not like, oh, they paid $800,000 and now they're fine, you know. I'm just annoyed that CC went away, which, you know, CC Motorcycle Coffee Shop. I
Did
love
they
that.
really?
They
how
closed.
long ago?
They've done this with a few businesses. They bought them up.
Oh my god!
They
closed them.
supposedly
Didn't
bailed
even
them out,
know.
and then they did what private equity loves to do. They slashed and burned and closed something.
I
and
don't
just
understand how you slash and burn. I think I've watched Succession like 1.5 times, and I still don't understand what
How it makes
private
money?
equity. Yeah, I just don't get it. I'm just like, is this when they start rapping to their dad? Like, I don't get. Do you know what I mean?
That's
like,
exactly what
Boy,
happens.
I hope so.
I'm like, I don't know where we're at with Sortis here.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, that brings me to what the hell is their name now? Because they are Sortis Holdings, formerly Sohai Brands, but also Sustainable Restaurant Group, which is ironic as hell considering the news about their restaurant. Like, what is the name of this business? Is it just a game of like shells being shifted around? Is like that what's going on here? They're just like creating subsidiary after subsidiary after subsidiary, because that is the interesting thing about this $800,000 deal. There is a little detail in that story by Jonathan Bach that if Sortis or Sohai Brands, whatever the parent company is, fails to actually make the entire payment, their subsidiary, Sustainable Restaurant Group, which is actually the company that owns Sizzle Pie and a bunch of the other Portland restaurants, actually becomes liable for all of it and has to foot the bill and would have to come up with the money on its own. So it's like there is a way that they could even like screw these restaurants that they own and just get out of this entirely by just saying, okay, they're responsible for it.
Oh shit!
Wiping their hands of it. Yeah. Like, I mean, it doesn't seem like that would be their plan, but it's just interesting how their parachute still could result in a bunch of these businesses that they supposedly saved going under.
That's the thing that's on my mind, Brian, the point that you made about supposedly saving these businesses, because like the intention of this business effort to begin with, Sortis buying up all these businesses during the pandemic because they were struggling, was to save them. And I just don't think, I'm feeling now, I guess, I'm doubting that they had the long-term vision to actually keep these businesses afloat. And it reminded me of this one quote from a previous restaurant owner, the owner of Clyde Common. I don't know how to pronounce their last name. I think it's Nate Tilde or Nate Tilde. But they had said back in the day when they had an offer from Sortis to be bought up and they denied it. And the quote says, "In the darkest hour, they came in as saviors, and I respect that. But I do think their play was buying great Portland brands at fire sale prices. I think they may be finding that it's hard to run a restaurant from a corporate boardroom," which I feel like we're just seeing that play out right now.
Hubris is what you're saying. Hubris.
Yeah, definitely.
Man, you know, I think you answered my question, Giulia, because I was like, how could this many businesses and funds be so mismanaged by someone, by like a company that's all about funds and business? Like, I'm like,
Their
oh yeah,
business is business
because it's a restaurant and restaurants are chaos.
They're hard.
You know what I mean?
difficult.
Like, they're not gonna understand why. Like, because it depends on the whims of human nature, and it's just like, yeah, good luck with that, buddy.
Yeah, and I also just wonder, in an alternate reality where COVID didn't happen, how many of these businesses would still be owned by, you know, individuals and still doing well, and we wouldn't be looking at these situations that we're looking at right now. Obviously, I can't go back in time. Maybe Claudia can pull up a crystal ball and answer the question for us. Would it turn out differently?
Not me.
I swear you've had one on the show before.
It's actually a magic 8-ball.
A magic 8-ball. Why am I saying a crystal ball?
Magic 8-ball.
It's a magic 8-ball, not a crystal ball. Yeah, sorry. This isn't like witchcraft. This is just like pure old fashioned.
What did I do?
Yeah, my bad.
Thank you, Brian, for reading up on that. I know that we on the show have been wondering what's going on with Sortis, so it's good to have a little check-in. All right, well, let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, more headlines of the week.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Okay, so my story this week is over the latest controversy in Old Town. It's a Willamette Week Sophie Peel joint, so you know there's going to be a verified hot gossip. Now,
Drama.
yeah. Sophie, the queen of sitting through meetings, last week,
Seriously.
she sat through the Old Town Community Association meeting, aka the OTCA. That's where many neighborhood improvement decisions for that area are made. And people in that association are basically all the people who make up that area. And the seemingly innocuous idea that landed like a bomb opened up old wounds and really highlighted the issues surrounding Old Town was a proposal to build a skate park on Block 25, which is located at Northwest 4th and Flanders and is bordered by the Blanchet House. It's a piece of land managed by Prosper Portland that has been in development since like 2019. So Old Town, if for some reason you've never been downtown, is a collection of long-standing cultural institutions like the Lansu Chinese Garden, the Portland Chinatown Museum, and the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. Old Town is also known as Old Town Chinatown because at one point that's where a lot of Asian Portlanders and businesses were anchored before they got pushed out east to 82nd. But as of today, New Old Town, as they're trying to rebrand it, encompasses a lot more than the previous Chinatown area. It crossed Burnside into Southwest, and it spills over onto the waterfront. So there are a lot of private businesses within that district, new ones like hotels and fancy bars and restaurants.
Yeah.
And this is important to note because Old Town is also where city and regional government some time ago decided to situate a lot of social service providers, shelters, and soup kitchens. So just straight off, you can see these three main factions and why they would be in opposition with each other just by like their existence, you know?
Right.
Oh,
so you
yeah.
have the cultural history of the Old Town Chinatown, the much needed social services now ingrained in that area, and also the businesses trying to survive in what is considered the seediest part of downtown. Okay. And that's like, that is a fact.
No, that is.
Everyone like doesn't want us. They're like, because, you know, has this cultural history and because you don't want to blame the people who are getting the social services. And also you don't want to, you know, rain down on like the businesses that are trying to survive. But it's like, everybody knows this. It's just the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the skate park. The city's Public Environment Management Office, which addresses livability-related issues in Portland's public spaces, was working on getting a small skate park built on Block 25, with what turned out to be mainly one member of the Old Town Community Association, Jesse Burke, who is the chair of the OTCA board, owner of the Society Hotel, and a recent candidate for Multnomah County Commissioner.
I thought that name was familiar.
Yes. There was, for some reason, there was like a lot of controversy when she ran because they were just like, oh, you know, she's part of this OTCA board. And like, when you read into it, you're like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, like it doesn't really seem that.
None of it kind of like shook out. But anyhow, so the idea went as far as permits being issued by Prosper Portland. Who was not on board appears to be the rest of the OTCA. At last week's meeting, members questioned how Burke obtained the permits without a vote. Not even the board had voted on it, and raised concerns about the idea. Some questioning if a skate park was the best use of that space, especially since, guys, we all know this. There's going to be a massive skate park literally a few blocks away underneath a steel bridge. So there was just like, there's a skate park. There's going to be a big skate park there. Why are we going to do another skate park? Also, a lot of people are just like, you really think this is going to clean up? Just another skate, like, what is that? Doesn't make any sense. But the city was just like, actually, it does. You know, it does clean stuff up because people are using it and like.
Right. It's not just sitting fallow. Like.
Yeah. It's not just literally what it is now, a lot, you know, a parking lot. Anyhow, now before we dive into what could appear to be a Jesse Burke bashing, I just want to point out that Burke has secured a lot of funding for that area and has been very vocal about helping clean up. So she's also directed a lot of attention to Old Town, which was needed because, as we just said, it's not the safest part. Pretty much on the same day that this meeting took place, a man allegedly threatened multiple people with a machete near the steel bridge.
Oh, yeah.
That happened like the day after or the day of. And it's just like,
That's Old Town.
Right. The Lansu Chinese Gardens had also, a few years back, had to get extra security fencing built after someone suffering a mental health crisis chucked an axe through the front window of their tea shop. Their tea shop, which is inside. You know?
Yeah, it's not like it's just sitting in the middle of the road.
Yeah. So these are real issues this neighborhood is facing, not made up ones that Jessie Burke is using to be a big old capitalist bee. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, she's like, this is real stuff. Okay, so now back to why everyone at this meeting was mad at her, though. As I stated, she was mostly working with the city alone to get a skate park built without the consent of the association that she chairs. During the heated meeting, Burke defended her decision and tried to shame the people who brought up, you know, like any opposition by saying that they were fighting progress. And at one point, she specifically called out the cultural institutions in Old Town for questioning her. This is a quote of hers from the article. I've been hearing a lot about losing culture, of not involving the right people. I've heard that some of the cultural institutions feel like they are being left behind. Change does not have to mean being left behind. I had someone say to me, I'm not Chinese enough to have a say. I'll take those hits, but I want everyone to know what that means. That means we're talking about blood quantum, to say how much is enough, and that's not right. Which already I was like, damn, like, yikes, like this is getting so personal. And after a very deep internet search, I saw that a post that Burke wrote that she is the granddaughter of a Chinese immigrant. She does not, she is very much
she doesn't necessarily
presenting.
say she's Chinese American, but
yeah.
I was wondering what she was referencing, and I assumed it was something like that. So
I
thanks for doing
I had
the digging.
to. Yeah, I was just like, well, is she part Chinese? I mean, why are we getting into blood quantum? Also, like, this is a skate park. What's happening? You know what I mean? You know
I know.
it seems like there's some deeper resentments here.
Before I get into more of what was said in that meeting, what do you guys think?
I think I get why people are upset with her because, you know, like, it seems like she didn't necessarily do this in the most visible way. But I also think people are maybe bringing out resentments over other issues and using this as the way to vent, because ultimately it's a skate park. I don't see her making any money off this skate park. Like, to what Claudia said, like, you know, there is some evidence that shows that it will help. Anything's better than a parking lot, let's be honest. But this really, I don't know, this really seems to me like there's something deeper here, and there's some resentments that have been building up behind the scenes that finally just like broke to the surface, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
Yeah, it really does feel that way. Immediately I started wondering about the technical parts of this, like their process of discussing and voting and approving projects like this. Makes me wonder why Burke would feel eager to go over all of that just to get this thing done. And I understand the motivation. I always am on the side of like, doing some things better than nothing, because we can always come back and course correct, right? But I also really want to emphasize how important it is to include just that diverse leadership at the table, because there is that historical context. There is that perspective that is earned from being in that space for so many decades. But things need to get moving.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I feel like a lot of the push is like, you know, the fact that people were not involved and that people who historically have felt ignored by the city are now feeling like they're being ignored in their own association.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why all of the services that are very much needed in our city were put all in one place.
Yeah.
Because they were just like, whatever, we don't care about these people. And we don't care what ends up happening to their lot of land. Because
like what happens to their property values, their neighborhood.
But what ended up happening was that the east side, which is, you know, where pretty much everyone lives, is now so much more desirable than the west side, which is where everyone used to live.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, when you go into downtown, you go into Burnside, and right to the right is usually a huge line of people trying to get into a shelter. It is not like the best visually welcome to a progressive city. It just shows the people who are like at the lowest rung of our society trying to survive. And it's just not the greatest feeling. Oh, let's go downtown and spend money. You know what I mean? You're just
let's
like,
go shopping.
Yeah, it's really
just
strange.
Like, you're just like, oh no. And this is because of our amazing urban planning in our city that was, a lot of it was motivated by just like ignorance and racism. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're just like, whatever. And classism, obviously. They're just like, we don't want to see that shit, you know?
Yeah.
Anyhow, it's all coming back to bite us, right? But again, I just ask, why another skate park? I know that you guys are like anything, but I'm just like, the fact that there's so many like
Totally.
organizations in there, it would be awesome if they could have all thought of something together.
Yeah, there are other,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, you could make it a small little green space. You could come up with like a community center.
Or like
there-
involve the White Lotus Market. And like,
Right.
I don't know if you do know about the White Lotus Market, but they do these incredible markets and pop-ups. What if they did like a little food cart there and it was
and it was like dedicated space for them.
and then it was like an incubator space. You know how like
Right.
they did in Mercado
Yeah,
for Latin
right.
people?
Yeah.
Let's do it for the Asians in fucking Old Town Chinatown. Get a
Like-
kitchen open, like, and it'd just be great. Like, and then they could give back to the community somehow. Like, we could figure this out. Like, they can help Blanche House with free food somehow. You know what I mean? Like, let's get this stuff going. I'm just throwing shit out there. I'm just like, another skate park? That's my only thing is like, there's a skate park right there. But like, we don't, again, like you guys said, something needs to happen. So I don't know.
And like, I want to, like, I definitely am like, something's better than nothing. I also think like we, as a community, we decided a long time ago to put all of those resources, all those shelters, and basically shove all of the people who are experiencing those issues into this neighborhood and, pulled out the things that make the neighborhood special and unique. Like we pulled out resources for a lot of those. So we created a lot of these problems. So like, I do think as a community, we need to help them with it. But I also think like, I get where people are upset with Burke for that because it almost feels a little bit like a benevolent dictator coming in and saying like, I can fix this, but it's like, it really needs to be a group effort.
Yeah. Well, board members ultimately decided that the permit Burke received from Prosper Portland was null and void, and that the board would have to take a vote on whether to accept that skate park permit in March.
It's coming up.
It's coming up. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Also, are all of the blocks in the city numbered?
I don't know, man.
I was wondering.
Now I want to know, like, what is my block?
I'm assuming. I mean, because like that would make sense, right? All right.
Yeah, I mean, everything is ordered here. It's a nice grid. So
We could get like block tattoos or something.
No, we're not doing that. All right, so let's take another break here, and when we come back, more headlines of the week. All right, Julie, what you got?
So my story comes from Danny Peterson and Elise Haas from Coin, and I'm talking about some really good news related to car thefts just announced last week, which I feel like everyone's going to be suspicious, but it's actually good. So according to some recently released data from the Portland Police Bureau, car thefts have declined by over 50% from 2022 to 2024, which means that last year they were the lowest they've been since 2016, which is wild.
Yeah.
And just thinking back to a couple years ago when Kias and Hyundais were getting stolen so often due to that
Kia
TikTok
boys.
trend, that some car insurance companies were literally dropping people. Brian, I think I remember you specifically having to deal with this.
I had a
right?
Kia at the time, and I had to get the steering wheel lock. No one ever stole my Kia. It was a piece of shit, so no one wanted to steal it. But I still have the wheel lock, even though I have like an EV, which is a lot harder to steal. I still use it because I have it, and why not? But yeah, I got a free steering wheel lock out of it.
Wait, Kia sent you a free
Yeah,
steering-
because
Oh my God,
the
I
software in the Kias, people found a loophole in it, and it made it so easy for 13-year-olds to steal your car
Oh my God.
that the only thing they could do was give you like something that immobilized the car.
Yeah.
So they sent out these steering wheel locks to everyone.
Yeah.
There are millions of these across
Yep.
America
I
now
didn't know this.
because of this.
Yeah. A friend of mine who also had a Hyundai that was actually stolen during that time period had to steal their own car back and now will forever have that bar. Every time we go anywhere, it's like, hang on, I got it. And then they lock it in.
I don't think you steal your car
No,
back. I think you
I
just
remember-
take it back.
Well,
I don't
true,
think
true.
You're like dramatically, she stole her car. She did not steal
That's
her car
true.
back.
It's her car.
That's her fucking car.
She's just reclaiming it. But I remember stories like this at the peak of car theft in Portland that like I don't necessarily know what the reason was, but it was really hard to get PPB's help on car thefts at the time.
Yeah.
And people were going out and tracking their own cars down through things like air tags and taking them back, which is kind of dangerous, but a little vigilante property reclamation.
Well, that Facebook group popped up.
Yeah.
And was it PDX Cars or something
It's
like that?
PDX Stolen Cars. It was founded by Titan Crawford. And I'll go back to just how much they've helped PPB since all of this started happening. But you did touch on something about why was this happening? Why were the police having such a hard time? And a lot of it comes down to their approach. So what was happening is that they were going about it a little bit like kind of just closing your eyes and throwing the dart and seeing where it lands, rather than like having an informed process of being like, okay, this feels like a car that is likely stolen. Now I'm going to check all these boxes before I go and make this traffic stop. So they were kind of like chasing their own tail, which I can only imagine was so frustrating. So let's go back to May of last year. I want to shout out some folks that really had an incredibly positive impact in making this happen. So Coin did some reporting on OHSU, this cancer researcher, Dr. Jeffrey Tyner, and Portland police officer Michael Terrett. They got together back in 2022 to develop a data-driven system to address these unprecedented amounts of vehicle thefts in Portland. And they basically applied the same approach of recognizing repeated patterns in cancer patients to stolen cars. And it actually worked. So the whole purpose was to refine the process of identifying and pursuing stolen vehicles from the start so that the ratio of traffic stops to arrests and vehicle seizures could improve. Because at the time, Portland police were finding only one stolen vehicle for every 31 traffic stops, which is wild.
Especially with how many stolen vehicles there were at the time. You have to imagine that they were probably passing a dozen on the way to that stop.
Yes. And so they compiled about 100 indicators that the Bureau now references to make informed guesses as to whether or not a car is stolen. Some examples of that are no plates, concealed punch ignition, even the make and model and the condition of the car can give clues. So they reference that before they go and make a traffic stop. And it's resulted in like notable decreases in traffic stops and increases in recovered stolen vehicles.
Interesting. I can't imagine that no plates was not like, a prerequisite of pulling someone over. It's like they have no plates.
I mean, during the pandemic, it seems like nobody had plates and like people were just going rogue.
And I think that's just what happened where individually officers were able to identify these things, but they weren't coming together to compare notes to be able to track these trends, which made it so much less efficient. All the while, there was this Facebook group that we mentioned, PDX Stolen Cars, that was also pulling together tips and information from the community to try to support officers in going and recovering these cars, which also had an incredibly positive impact, where in situations where they were going out to do an enforcement outing to recover stolen vehicles, they were starting to recover like dozens more an outing than they were before on average.
Yeah. They were doing such a good job that at one point the police were just telling people to go there. And
oh my gosh.
And PDX Stolen Cars were like, hey, can you do your job? And also like, this is help us. What are you doing? Like, they're just like, no, we're not going to investigate. Just go to PDX Stolen Cars, which is like, I know. We're not going to go into, because we don't, you know what I mean?
That could be a whole series.
We don't even know what was going on with the Portland Police Department, like 3 or 4, where they,
at the time.
It just felt like they weren't doing their job, but like, we don't know what the fuck was happening. You know what I mean? It's so easy for us to be like, well, they weren't doing their job. And I know a lot of stuff came out that they purposely were not doing their job when it came to, like moving violations and stuff like that. Traffic enforcement. Yeah. Anyhow, but I do want to just point out real quick that Officer Michael Terrett, who was one of the leading officers who like kind of brought this in, the reason he did that was because he and Tyner, Dr. Jeffrey Tyner, knew each other socially. And I just wanted to point that out because one, community, but two, like that just shows like how these issues that we have in our city, sometimes the best person for the job doesn't have the job.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And you have to talk to each other. And like, that's the whole point of creating community, is like they were just shooting the shit because their kids, hang out or whatever. And the officer was like, dude, these stolen cars. And then, Dr. Jeffrey Tyner was like, well, have you thought about it? I mean, he doesn't talk that way, but you know what I mean? But, and I just thought that was so cool.
I think it's really the thing we're trying to do as a city right now. And what's even more cool is that the U.S. Department of Justice was like, hey, I see you, and that shit is cool. And they invested $800,000 so that OHSU and the Portland Police Bureau can continue to work together for the next 3 years. And they're looking into the model to try to apply it nationally and also include it in addressing other issues like trafficking and gun violence. So we're really like setting the tone here, which is so cool. Yeah,
doing something good.
Portland gonna clean up America?
Oh boy. I can see the people at Fox News right now.
ambitious.
They're never going to give us credit. Are you kidding me? They're just going to be like, whatever. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
I think this is really cool news. I'm still going to use my steering wheel lock because it's fun. It's just a habit at this point. It's fun.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to see that like the community helped solve this problem, and we're seeing progress now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thanks you guys for hanging out with me this morning, going through some of the headlines of this week. I don't know if can you guys see out your window? 'Cause
Yeah,
there is
it looks like a
flurry.
blizzard.
No.
There is a blizzard.
Oh,
happening outside.
jeez.
The road is completely covered. The yard is completely covered, and it just is blowing like sheets of snow at my windows this whole time.
Yeah.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yeah, everyone, if you don't have to drive, so just don't drive. Just
Stay
don't go-
home.
Just stay home.
Mhm.
Come on. Anyway, warm thoughts to everyone, and I hope that you guys have a good weekend.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our podcast production team this week was John Atariani, Giulia Fiaoni, and Selena C.A. Reynolds. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Steven Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. And just a quick note that we are taking Monday off, so we will be back Tuesday with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.